私には一人で戦い抜ける力がいる。
Corruption derived from true obsession is a dark and powerful thing. To be so possessed by a need to reach a goal that one compromises both their morals and how they behave, it's an outcome that is uncomfortable at best. Regardless, for the last surviving member of the Kurta clan, the ends hold so much value that extreme means are not only necessary, but a necessity at times. This is a double-edged sword. Such fierce determination gives Kurapika every opportunity to achieve his goals, but being entrenched in hate takes its toll. And as terrifying as the idea of not realizing that you're slowly losing yourself on the way to a goal is, being self-aware of this is arguably worse. As if you're looking at yourself in a mirror, slowly but surely watching who you once were fade into nothingness, aware but unable to do anything. This is who Kurapika is, a formerly bright and vibrant young man who doesn't enjoy what he's doing, but knows that he can't give up on his ambitions no matter how miserable they make him, and how profoundly they change him. However, it takes a great deal to change who a person is at the deepest level, and in this regard, Kurapika is not all the way gone. Although we've seen how far he's sunk and how much colder he seems in the Dark Continent arc, some little moments and hints make it obvious that at some level, he retains sense of the caring, loving boy of his past. But the time to save himself is shortening, and a critical moment for Kurapika in the entire series is on the horizon, as so many big characters seem destined to meet in the Dark Continent arc. But what got him to such a critical point? For years now, Kurapika's life has been wrought with obsession. In a departure from the archetypal revenge character, Kurapika is given another dimension through his self-awareness and his dynamism. While he isn't someone with a static goal, he's consistent in that he always seems to have a dangerous fixation. Having goals is obviously fine, but whether it be capturing the spiders, recovering the Scarlet Eyes, or maybe even going after the fourth prince in the future, the nature of these goals is so self-destructive for Kurapika that there's always a chance that his hatred could end up ruling him, or leading him to an early grave. While there is much more to him, this bold ambition is comfortably his primary character trait for the majority of the series. This is evident in, but far from limited to, the occasion where he tells Netero that while he would prefer not to fight at all, he's willing to do anything to get his license, which would include fighting those he has come to think of as friends. But at the same time, he is only so focused on this goal because he's a completely caring person. His desire for revenge is born of the compassion and love he felt for his family and clan, and tragedy has not changed his inherent nature. Despite his reservations and initial trepidation in getting to know people, he grows attachments to our protagonists relatively quickly, and as demonstrated through his past and the story itself, he considers these attachments to be vital. As described by Tales of Nerdia, Kurapika has a sort of duality. On one hand, he puts his everything into his dark ambitions, but on the other, he is too caring of a person to be solely defined by what he perceives as his true purpose. And this is the most important aspect of Kurapika going forward. Some could construe his goal as selfish, and that's definitely not an invalid claim. But what is Hunter x Hunter if not a story filled with justifiably self-interested people in a world where altruism is debilitating more often than not? Everyone has their own goals, and one of the main challenges in writing a story like this is making the relevant characters resonate with the audience. While Hunter x Hunter is on point and believable with the cynicism that is present in so many of its characters, self-interest is not a character trait that's easy to adhere an audience to, especially with how fickle people can be when it comes to characters. So Togashi needed to go the full 9 yards in working nuance into these people. Otherwise, how else would we be able to become invested? The resonance of Kurapika's character comes from Togashi establishing intrigue in him by adhering the audience to the cool factor of the archetypal mysterious young man with a tragic past hell-bent on revenge, and slowly allowing characterization to fill in the subtle gaps that first impressions can't. From there, we become familiar with the quirks of Kurapika, his gentle kindness, his intelligence, and his quiet appreciation for the joyous moments in life. And since we get to know this softer side of Kurapika, it is genuinely conflicting to root for his success, given the knowledge that success could be detrimental to his well-being. It's such a human thing to desire personal recompense, and because of how easy it is to sympathize with Kurapika, it's hard to resent him for it. Sometimes people simply deserve what's coming to them, and something as sacred as his clan's eyes deserve respect and restoration. But at the same time, it's hard to advocate for him striving for these things because of how bad this quest is for him psychologically. And it's clear that what's healthiest for Kurapika is to simply be in the company of those who love and value him, because that is when his heart is at its fullest. Living with the living, and not living for the dead. Maybe Kurapika considers his friends to be a weakness of his, not allowing him to strive as strongly as he can towards his goal, but in the similar vein to his hatred and fury, this weakness is the very crux of what makes him human. And there's a fundamental balance in this duality. Kurapika's reaction after killing Uvogin was very telling. A soulless, glazed-over look in his eye, a somber reflection of the cycle of suffering that his life had become. Obviously, there was a large amount of frustration within him because Uvogin had decided not to divulge any information on the troop, but I also see a despondent look in those eyes. Almost as if he's questioning if his life's endeavor is something that will truly bring him peace of mind. There may have been initial catharsis, but getting revenge is not something that Kurapika derives pleasure from, and he's painfully aware of that. Yet, he continues anyway, because he needs to. He sacrificed so much to get to the point where he was powerful enough to both capture the Phantom Troop and restore his clan's eyes. Through passing the exam, developing his specific Nen techniques, and integrating himself with the underworld of the setting, Kurapika has proven his resolve time and time again. He wants to do this. He needs to do this to restore the pride of his clan and carry out justice. But is it really justice? Or is it just vengeance? There's a fine but very significant line between justice and revenge. While justice can be a byproduct of revenge, the two are very different. Justice is usually carried out by an impartial third party, like law enforcement, to right the moral wrongs that have been enacted on society. Justice balances things and brings a resolution to situations. But while justice is rational and impartial, vengeance is emotional and personal. While justice brings closure, revenge doesn't resolve anything, and further fuels emptiness. But the thing is, justice is not that prominent in the world of Hunter x Hunter. While the Hunters Association is tasked with protection, preservation, and capturing criminals, in actuality there are very few people that are concerned with things that won't benefit them. There are obvious exceptions, but at the very least, within the window of the world that Togashi has provided, justice is not a big thought for most of these characters. And when we circle back to Kurapika, we'll find that he is no different. While the act of hunting down the Phantom Troop, capturing them, and restoring the Scarlet Eyes is a form of societal justice, that is not Kurapika's primary motivation. And as much as his motives were born out of a care for others and a pride in his clan, the main reason he carries out these actions now are strictly emotional, selfish, and self-destructive.
死は全く怖くない。一番恐れるのは、この怒りがやがて風化してしまわないかということだ。
Revenge consumes you and eats away at your soul. When we finally see Kurapika again during the Dark Continent arc, he's very visibly changed. Some critical self-awareness is clearer than ever when he describes himself as a beast in human's clothing. Kurapika has been enveloped in hatred for so long, and in the absence of his friends, he has grown to use nefarious methods to retain the Kurta Eyes, as he has told Mizaistrom. He was in danger of sinking into darkness when he was feeling a self-proclaimed, indescribable emptiness upon thinking that the troop had been killed, and luckily he was brought back to Earth by Gon and his friends. But in going through all sorts of hell to get these eyes, Kurapika has gradually relapsed. So what happens if he captures the remaining members of the Spider? If he eventually finds all of the Scarlet Eyes of the Kurta clan? Will he seriously feel satisfied and whole? Unlikely. If anything, Kurapika's fury will remain, but he'll find himself without a goal or outlet. And that's a very dangerous thing. Keep in mind, this is assuming that he's able to achieve a goal that is already fraught with mortal peril without succumbing to darkness or being killed beforehand, and that's far from guaranteed. There's something very removed and cold about Kurapika's character, especially later on in the series. The way in which he ignores his friends, especially Leorio, is far from endearing, and I'm sure that there's a small part in every reader that wants to throttle the guy and force him to just hang out with his pals for hours on end, just because of all the good it'll do him. But the thing is, Kurapika is an intelligent guy with a pretty good grasp of who he is, so I'm sure he's thought of this, and I'm sure he wants to reach out to his friends. He describes himself as a man without a home, but just as Killua, I'm sure he would be able to find something resembling a home through his loved ones. However, he just can't. And as unlikable as this character trait of his is, his ability to distance himself from those he cares about for the sake of his goals is a testament to his resolve. It's as admirable as it is frustrating, because Kurapika knows just how much these people mean to him, yet he's strong enough to realize that as much as they could save him, he has to have conviction. But the recently released chapter 361 sheds some more light on this issue, and actually adds a little bit of a new dimension to Kurapika. In this chapter, we're shown a flashback where Kurapika's old Nen teacher tells him that he should accept help from others, and compromise on the coverage of his powers to promote this. However, Kurapika actively goes against this advice, deciding to go at it alone. We're told that the chain on his index finger is capable of replicating other Nen abilities. Its use is very limited, but this power partly represents the fact that Kurapika feels the need to do things on his own. Using this ability, he has access to all kinds of powers, meaning that there is less need to use people other than himself on this quest. He separates himself from the others not just because they weaken his resolve, but for their own protection, and the flashback to his friends illustrates this point. He feels an extreme care for his friends and wants to be alongside them, but due to a combination of his red-hot motivation for his goal, his knowledge of what it would take, and his concern for his friends' well-being, he can't. The contrasting motivations that result in this distancing, and the way they sum up the character, really drive home this dualism. Krololu Silver is arguably one of the best judges of character in the series. He seems to have a knack for understanding people and who they are at essence, and one of the most important observations he makes is that Kurapika is simply unable to commit to anything if a consequence would mean harm for his friends. While he was captured, Krollu was so confident that he wouldn't be killed due to Gon and Killua being the spider's hostages. And his confidence wasn't misplaced, because at the time of the York New Arc, Kurapika's friends mattered more to him than anything else. Whether that is still true in the Dark Continent remains to be seen, but the signs are positive. In my opinion, human connection is the one thing that has consistently stopped Kurapika from going off the deep end, and it is the only thing left that can save him. If he embraces it, he has every chance of finding fulfillment, but if he abandons it to focus only on his goal, he may find himself lost. Kurapika is a character that would likely be on a path of relative light, if not for one devastating event. But instead, he straddles the line between the abyss and a path to a fulfilling life, between self-betterment and self-destruction, and the one thing that has kept him from giving into his darkness has been his friends. It seems as though Kurapika has somewhat moved on from his quest for revenge following the wonderful anti-climax of the York New Arc, with his motivations instead set on collecting the eyes of his brethren, but with the Dark Continent arc in full swing, and the troop likely to cross paths with the Chain User once again, those old feelings are very likely to resurface. And I think Kurapika will come to find that a longing for vengeance cannot easily remain buried when the source of so much of your pain is right in front of your face. There is the obvious caveat of Hisoka's own onslaught, but I'm fairly convinced that the story between the spider and the lone surviving Kurta is not yet resolved. I can't speak for anyone but myself, but for me, the main element in Kurapika's story that keeps me glued to the screen and each page is not just a desire to see him grind the spiders into dust, or an interest in seeing how he intelligently deals with the many moving parts and political strife of the Dark Continent expedition. While he isn't the most likable character in the world, his tragic self-awareness, care for human connection, and admirable resolve make me care for the guy. So above all, what I care about most is that Kurapika's journey ends happily for him. And since this is such a broad subject of investment, all of the little details along the way to that revelation are given extra weight because of any potential repercussions they could bring to the table. It all comes back to the concept of nature, circumstance, and resulting motives shaping who we are. Kurapika is probably one of the bluntest displays of nature and nurture characterization that I've ever seen, but this all works in the story's favor and prevents him from being a one-dimensional revenge machine of a character. His nature endears him to the audience, while the circumstances that shaped him have morphed him into a very conflicting character, whose every action carries weight. In the end, we have a lost soul that is so easy to become invested in and root for, yet one who, should he continue striving for his goals, may never find solace if he does not prioritize the things that can become his saving grace. How far will Kurapika go before he can finally rest? And how much of himself will be left if he ever finishes? As I've postulated, there is still ample opportunity for Kurapika to change, but he's slowly wasting away. Will he give in to darkness, let his rage consume him, and allow emptiness to fill him until he self-destructs? Or will he realize that no satisfaction or closure comes from revenge, and attempt to finally form a meaningful life that he so deserves? I've got my thoughts on which is more likely, but I'd like to hear what you guys think. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you all later.